Hello, all my friends and Ringing Cedars readers. This is Gabriel, and this is the Co-Creation and Joy Radio podcast, hosted by me, Gabriel Miguel, and presented by Anastasia USA. And today, I wanted to speak about a topic I've been doing a lot of thinking about and a topic I've been doing a lot of research about. And that topic is creating kins domains, and a lot of insights that I've had and thoughts that I wanted to share with you about creating kins domains and the motivations behind them and proper mindset about it and just ways of thinking about it and things of that nature. So wanted to dive right into it and start this off by saying recently I've been discussing with a good friend of mine and trusted advisor and collaborator in all the work that I've been doing for many years already. We've known each other for a while. And she's been involved in one way or another in the creation or organization of different kins domain settlements across the USA, Canada, and I believe Europe, mostly in the USA and Canada, mainly USA. And she currently has her own land in Colorado. If you'd like to reach out to her, she has 80 acres of land in Colorado. The name of her community is Charisma, and her name is Joyce. I can connect you with her if you just reply directly to me. I'd be happy to do that if you're interested in becoming a part of her community and getting land and building your kins domain there in Colorado. I'd wait to see if you want to contact her until after I finish what I wanted to talk about today. So I've been speaking with Joyce recently, and she's a very knowledgeable woman and very insightful. She's seen a lot of kins domain settlements and individual kins domains begin projects that, how far they all got was different. But she's been involved, probably since the books were published in English around that time. So easily a little bit more than 10 years. And she's gained a lot of insights and shared some thoughts with me. And we've been discussing creating communities and collaborating. I've received recently, within the last year or so, many different offers for land that could be donated to Anastasia USA, or land that a donor or somebody would have that they would allow families to come and build their kins domains on that land. And so we've been figuring out what's the best way to go about this and organizing these large buildings of settlements and projects, and probably around 1,000 acres of land total here and there, probably a lot more if I really thought about it, because I've been in touch with so many people over all this time. Anyway, back to my point. So Joyce has a lot of insight. She's seen a lot of communities come and go. And one thing she was sharing with me as we were discussing how to manage these, how to organize the building of kins domain settlements on land that has been offered to me and Anastasia USA, and to all of you listening, how to best do that. She brought up a couple points and it made me think. And one thing, I'll just tell you kind of what I thought, and it's a very interesting, just very interesting thoughts. So I guess where to begin is where Anastasia first brought up the idea of kins domains in book 4, in the chapter, Even Today Everyone Can Build a Home. The very interesting thing was, she said, first, choose for yourself a place of your own you like best of all the pleasing spaces on the earth, a place where you would like to live and would like your children to live out their lives. and then you will indeed leave to your great-grandchildren a fitting memorial to you. The climate, too, in that place must be favorable for you. Take 1 hectare of land in that place for yourself in perpetuity. And how that applies to the building of individual kinsdomains and communities is very interesting. She was saying that the reason that a lot of these kinsdomain projects that she had saw, mainly when they were trying to build larger settlements and not just individual domains, why they have come and gone and why many of them don't exist anymore or they had failed, was that the people who were coming in and getting involved were focusing on this very big like community aspect, right? And they expected a lot of things to be kind of more communal, and they expected things to be more shared and things to have a much more community focused thing rather than the individual family thing. And it's a really interesting thought, and I want to dig deeper on that with you guys because it's something important to think about. And so, for example, how I think about what a kinsdomain settlement is it starts with the individual family, right? It starts with you, the person you love, and either your children and the children you're planning on having. But it's about, here's one of the main points I wanted to make. It's about your individual soul connection to that particular piece of land, that hectare of land, and your soul's connection to it is the primary thing that matters when it comes to creating a kinsdomain for you and when it comes to building a settlement together with other people, right? And so I believe, and what I've been thinking after speaking with Joyce, is that the main thing to focus on is not the idea of like, even when I said earlier, we've been offered a lot of land to distribute and help people get involved and begin building settlements. It's not about, people can get easily maybe distracted or very interested or focused on the idea of, wow, they have 300 acres in Colorado or something, or 100 acres in New York, and wow, they're going to build this community. And we can get wrapped up in these intellectual ideas of what we want, right? Of, oh yeah, there's this land there, it's beautiful, and there's a bunch of people interested and involved, blah, blah, blah. And a person can even go and act on those thoughts and go through the process of becoming part of the community and getting land and making a dedication and possibly moving to this land and going through the motions, right, of starting to build a kinsdomain and everything. But there's a possibility of doing it from a place of this motivation where it's really kind of more intellectual, and it's more even about the fact that you're like possibly doing it with others, or you're joining this big community project, right? Like you're joining this big community project. And I'll dive more deeper on some of the community things too. But like you're joining this big community project, but really, like I was saying earlier, and even Anastasia's specific instructions in the book, or you could say recommendations, I wouldn't say instructions. It's all about your individual soul connection with that land. And so it's interesting to see how, from her experience, and this is what I took from it. Joyce, I don't know if you wind up listening to this, maybe we should have another conversation. But what I took from it was that you have to make your individual connection to that piece of land from your heart and from your soul the primary decision making factor, right? Like, you should only move to this land if you go to this land and you feel drawn to it. This is the place, right? Like, I know in my heart and my soul. That's why I personally have not moved to a specific piece of land and begun to build my kin's domain anywhere in particular, because I haven't felt that feeling. And I've been offered land in many different places by many of you, maybe possibly listening, or many kind people that I've met in my years of being involved with this Ringing Cedars work. But I never had that feeling in my heart or in my soul that this was the place to go. This was the course of action that I was supposed to take. And I think that's important, because this is a soul thing. This isn't a mind thing. This isn't, you have to be practical. It's not to say you have to abandon your rational thinking capacity, right? That's not the point. But the point is that this kin's domain project, space of love, this is way 100% about the soul, 100% about the heart. This is about eternity, right? Eternity on this piece of land, passing it on to your children in perpetuity and everything like that. And so it's interesting too. I was thinking about, I'm sure there's a few examples in the series, but in particular in book 8.1, there's that story, or that chapter. Let me just find the name of it so I can quote this to you properly. I have my book right here. You probably hear me flipping through it. It's called "I'm Giving Birth to You, My Angel," right? And it's the story of this guy, Victor, the entrepreneur, and the woman who eventually becomes his wife, whose name I am forgetting, and I will find it now just so I can do her proper service here. 116, page 116. Inga, right? Victor and Inga, right? And the interesting thing about that story, I don't want to spoil it if you haven't read it. It's just that's an incentive for you to go continue through the series, because it's a fantastic story. Or you just read it online somewhere, or whatever, bounce around. But anyway, the interesting thing about that story is Inga read the books. Victor didn't, but he very much believed in her vision, and he trusted her. And so they started going through the procedure eventually of driving around different places, around different villages in Russia, abandoned villages, and I'm assuming other lands, and possibly even some existing Ringing Cedars, Anastasia communities. And mind you, this guy had a bunch of money too. This guy was a rich entrepreneur. It didn't seem like money was a problem. So he could have bought land in any old place, and they probably had access to many different opportunities, right? But they went through this process of months driving around, and eventually they arrived at a place in an abandoned village, or maybe a small village, and they both step out of the car and they said, "I feel like this is the place. This is it." It was an immediate knowing, right, in their soul. It wasn't, they saw every feature of the land and they got a land surveyor and they were happy with the report and they decided to buy the land. It was, as soon as they got there, they knew, right? And so that's kind of the point I want to make, is there's a lot of, of course, our individual kin's domains eventually become a community. And I think that's where we have to start. I don't think it's the other way around. We're not coming together to form a community, right? We kind of are, but really what we're coming to do is take a hectare of land and build a space of love for our family, right? It's about the individual family. It's about the love and the connection and your soul with that, of that individual family with that land. And then there's a bunch of individual families doing that together. It isn't a whole bunch of families are coming together to create this big community, right? Because then as Joyce was sharing with me, you can lose your focus of your connection with your individual land, right? And that seems to have been the case in a couple Kins domain communities that we're trying to begin, or many of them. And there's other organizational challenges and social challenges that people face. And my conversation with her, and this is something I've been thinking about for a long time, but it's inspiring me to go into a bit of a research phase and to come together and really put together an exhaustive list of what are the potential obstacles that a Kins domain creator can face, either as an individual family with their land and as a community, and put that out as a resource for you guys. Because it's something that should be noted. The dream itself is incredibly beautiful. It's beautiful and should be cherished. The dream of creating a Kins domain is beautiful and should be cherished, and it's possibly the greatest dream that a human being can have. It's the greatest aspiration that you can have. At the same time, there is also practical things that need to be taken into consideration as well. And these aren't things that are intended to cancel out the dream or water down the dream or kill the dream, but it's more to kind of flesh out the plans of the dream, right? Because you have to clearly understand where you're going and how you're going to get there and what obstacles you might face, right? Somewhere in the books, Anastasia said, in reference to the dark forces, that she said you need to understand your enemy in order to properly do combat with them. And so the enemy in this case would be the obstacles that many thousands of people have faced when creating their Kins domains, right? In Russia, they have a couple decades of experience at this point. And I'm sure that their collective knowledge is refining as time goes on. And people have probably learned a lot. And this makes me think of another thing I was thinking about. This makes me think of a thought, right? Kind of funny. I hope somebody laughed at that. And so this makes me think of another thing that Kins domain creators could face as a potential challenge, and another interesting insight. So I wrote an article on my website, anastasiausa.land, which was intended to be an introductory guide, an introductory explanation to someone who had not heard about Kins domains and kind of what they were, what they can achieve in the world, what the idea is, and kind of a bit of the history about it. And in that article, I quoted Vladimir McGree. So I used to work with a nonprofit called Nexus, and Vladimir came to one of our events at the United Nations in 2015, and it was interesting. He presented at a session about eco communities and kind of communities of the future. I forget what the name of the session was. I wasn't present for that particular summit that year. I became involved the year after. My best friend was the one who brought Vladimir over in 2015. And anyway, so he presented, and what was interesting is that he found, when he was talking about Kins domains with Americans and kind of there were the other eco community and eco village people in the room. It was a big talk about communities and eco villages and stuff like that. And what he found was that a lot of Americans or Western minded people didn't get it, to put it frankly. They didn't get it, or they associated it with something that they had previously known as far as like eco villages. So, he goes in there and tells them, 1 hectare of land, 2.5 acres for each family. And people immediately start associating that with some type of communal thing, right? Like the eco villages of America that America has had for, decades, where everything is very communal and shared, and, there's big shared houses and everybody shares meals together and on and on. And he found that a lot of people couldn't understand what they were saying, what he was saying. And it was interesting. It was kind of an interesting thought. And I was thinking about this last night, and I realized, at least to my knowledge, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong here, but in America, well, in Russia, their history with land, as far as like, the last few decades is concerned, there's the dacha movement, right? People, it's very accepted and common in Russian culture to know someone who has a dacha and go to a dacha even, or even have spent a lot of time on a dacha when you were a child. It's very common. Most Russians know someone who has a dacha. It's extremely common. And this is, kind of just individual gardens, right? There isn't, big, they're not hippie communes, for lack of a better word. They're not large communities. They're individual dacha garden plots, right? But in the U.S., there is, the people of the U.S. and Canada do have a history of gardening and caring about nature, but we never had dachas, right? Homesteading kind of died out, within the last few decades for sure, generally. Well, not last few decades, you could say last 100. It used to be a lot more common, right? Generational ancestral land was a lot more common in the U.S. before the last 100 years than it is now. And basically, we have this history of, like, our connection with the land. We have eco-villages and things of that nature. Eco-villages, communes. We don't have dachas. And it's interesting because we have a history of everything being shared, right? That's kind of the point. Everything is shared. And so the emphasis on the individual family is a bit less. And our pre-existing models and references, like for communities and things like that, it's all based on these more communal shared things. We don't have references for individual families doing something entirely for their individual family and then doing that collectively, right? So those were a couple insights that I had. In future episodes, I definitely want to talk more specifically about the organizational challenges, the practical challenges, right? Things about animal management. You'd be surprised that becomes a big thing. Resource management for the community as a whole. But one example that Joyce gave me was that some families in certain Kinsdomain communities had their hectare of land, but then they felt that they could go and harvest resources from another part of the land which did not belong to them. And so you see that's kind of where the rub is. It's like they believe they have a right to this land because it's part of the community, but then there's all these discrepancies, and these are personal things that people have to figure out on their own. I don't have all the answers. I'm just a guy who is researching and trying to find his own way and share what he discovers with everyone. Here's just an interesting example of that topic that I was talking about. So a friend of mine, Yuri Smirnov, he published a magazine for a few years called Space of Love. Highly recommended. It's available as a PDF download now on their website. I believe it's ecominded.net. I just spoke with Yuri's partner, and I believe I should be interviewing him soon for this show. He's a fantastic content creator, activist for the Ringing Cedars for many, many years, and very intelligent and insightful man. And he also does tours for dolmens in Russia. I've been meaning to do a tour with him myself for a while, and COVID prevented me from going this year, but pretty soon I should be going there. Anyway, he in one of the issues for his magazine, I have a few physical copies given to me by Carla. Carla, if you're listening, thank you so much. These were amazing. Great gift. And so in the 7th issue, in a 4-part series, they did a 4-part series on organizational challenges for Ringing Cedars eco-villages, right? It's like, do you call it a settlement, eco-village, community, whatever? So many different words. Let's find the best one, right? I like to say settlement, but that almost sounds a little primitive at times. So community, settlement, who knows? Anyway, one interesting story was I'm just going to read here directly and you guys can take from this. So it also seems more common that large plots are more frequently appropriated by those who rarely appear in the settlement, right? In our particular case, we had a flagrant, in parentheses, in my own opinion, case where a woman who had already had 3 hectares of land, visiting it but 4 to 5 times a year, tried to obtain 2 more hectares for herself, quote, to dig out a pond on them, end quote, while she had already ruthlessly cut down most of the trees on her available land and wanted to plant the whole area with hybrid strawberries for sale. Must we explain that such behavior hardly reminds us of the idea of a kin's domain and looks more like a safe place for a cheap commercial farm or summer residence, right? And so that's the thing. I think those of us who read the Ringing Cedars books should really do ourselves the favor of taking the time to really connect with the idea of what a kin's domain truly is. It's not a piece of land. You know, she had 3 hectares, this woman in particular, and decided to try to get 2 more to, you know, cut it all down and dig a pond. Don't understand why you need 2 hectares of land to build a pond, but it's clearly, very clearly not what Anastasia described. And I believe this woman may have been acting from a sense of she was thinking she was already familiar with all these models and ways of living, and she was just going to do it based on what she already knew. I clearly she didn't get it, right? There was some break in her understanding of what this all was and what this was about. The purpose isn't to cut down all the land and plant hybrid strawberries for sale, right? If you read the books, and granted, I don't want to sound like I'm being, you know, oh, if you read the books, right? If you read the books and, oh, you'll get it. You know, I'm not that kind of guy. But what I'm saying is, if you're saying you're building a kin's domain, if you read the books, it's kind of not, right? 3 hectares of land, hybrid strawberries. Anastasia talks a lot about not specifically growing things for their commercial value and the detriment of growing things solely for commercial value, because then there's no emotional connection. The plants don't give you any beneficial energy in return. In that type of transactional case, that becomes a case of just value extraction from the land, extracting value from the land without any real spiritual connection with the land. And that's the entire point of the kin's domain thing. And so I want to bring this to your attention, and these types of things to your attention, to help you succeed in your dreams and your goals, right? This is why I'm talking about this. I'm not trying to be a Debbie Downer or a rain on anyone's parade in any sense, but we need to clarify our thinking, and we need to be aware of the obstacles that can face us. So again, like I said, I will speak more about organizational challenges and environmental challenges. Here's a few points from this article. One of the points was the concept of a kin's domain and its size, right? So this is the 4th point that they made. We're a little bit into the series. So, you know, people taking more than a hectare of land and multiple hectares of land, and you know, how do you divide that all up? How do you say which part is the kin's domain, which isn't? Public space public spaces in a kin's village, right? So clearly defining what are the public spaces where everyone can do things communally. For example, when I went to visit the Vedrusha settlement in Krasnodar in 2016, October of 2016, they did have public houses across the settlement. So they were these geodesic domes that were available for public use. They were quite comfortable, and while I was there, they didn't have running water or anything like that, but they were seemingly kind of well insulated, and they had space and chairs and a little stage for people to perform. And while I was there, there was a couple concerts. There was the Sunny Bards came, and they're a group of traveling bards in Russia, and they came and gave a concert. It was fantastic. Everyone was dancing, and there was a birthday party or two that I was present for, and a couple other gatherings. So there are public spaces. I remember that they teach school there, so they teach the children. I'm not sure if their entire schooling is like done there, but I remember that they taught languages there. At least there was like English and language classes. So you have public spaces. Then you have the integration of the vision of a kin's village with its community. So everybody kind of sharing the same vision. Another challenge is the name, right? Naming the settlement. And these are things I want to go into in a future episode. And so let me think. I just want to make sure I'm closing this out with generally everything I wanted to say on this topic. But long story short is it's all about your soul's connection with that particular piece of land and starting there. A community is almost, you could say, a byproduct of the individual family's connection with that land. So pay attention to your feelings, pay attention to your heart, pay attention to your soul when you're presented with opportunities for acquiring land and building your future there. So there's that. Then be aware of what ways you might be thinking about what a kin's domain really is. It's not a place where you plant half of the land with strawberries that you're going to sell. You can plant some strawberries for sure, but it's not a commercial farm operation, right? So take some time to meditate and connect with the idea. Be aware of the potential and very real challenges that many people have faced when creating their kin's domains and likewise settlements and communities. There are things, people are people, wonderful people with wonderful goals and aspirations, but yet we are all human. And there are practical challenges. Animal management can be one thing. One thing Joyce told me was that people were bringing animals onto her land, and they couldn't manage the animals and have their own animals stay on their own hectare. And so the animals kept going outside of the hectare, and apparently, I don't remember exactly what she told me, but they were messing a lot of things up and traveling all around the land. And eventually some of the community members began demanding that, I'm not sure if it was Joyce exactly, but that the community as a whole, put up all this fencing around a very large piece of land, much more than just this one family's hectare, in order to manage all the animals. But the main thing is that they weren't taking that personal responsibility for themselves as the individual family, right? Because they brought the animals, they caused the issue, yet they demanded the solution be brought for them by the collective, right? So the collective shouldn't have to be responsible for the acts of one or two individual families and to compensate for their lack of planning or lack of preparedness for what they went out to do. And I think that's really important, Another thing Joyce shared with me was that, many of us, myself included, I have a little bit of a background with animals. I grew up near I had a farm across the street, horses and goats and cornfields, and been around animals a bit, but I didn't manage animals on a day-to-day basis, certainly. And many of us have not. And that is a common thing. And so many people want to have animals on their kin's domain, right? Like it's recommended. That's how you should do it. The problem is people don't understand what that entails. Chickens, if you leave them in, places with vegetation for too long, they will eat everything and just leave bare dirt. There's a permaculture technique called a chicken tractor, where you basically put chickens in a certain certain piece of grass or little piece of land and fence it off and leave them there and let them eat everything and turn the soil with their little talons and everything like that. There's purposes and there's reasons, like, there's times where that's useful, but the chicken tractors, then after they eat up a place, you move it and you keep moving and they keep grazing on that pieces of land and doing that. And if you're not careful with your chickens and you have too many chickens, you can really mess up your land, And same thing goes with other animals, etc. They take a lot of resources and planning to manage. And so in this particular story that Joyce told me, that actually apparently a big reason why some things had not gone well there and some families wound up leaving was because of the animal thing, right? The animal management and this demand for like a big fence. And I don't remember this story exactly, but this is something that we wouldn't expect, right? This is something that we wouldn't expect could be the cause for a community not succeeding, but it was, or at least it was a factor. So I'll leave you guys with that. I wanted to give some news as well. I hope this was useful, by the way. I plan on doing a lot more of these. So some news from my end is I have a few more interviews lined up. Like I mentioned earlier, I have an interview with Yuri Smirnov from Russia, incredibly interesting and insightful man on all these topics, and a longtime activist, someone who I greatly respect, and I'm very looking forward to speaking with him. I have an interview set up with Janice Barcelo, who's a member of the Ringing Cedars community and a wonderful birth researcher. So all the health effects of birth and everything that our modern hospital system is doing with women in regards to birth, and fantastic researcher. Look up her work. And also, very passionate Ringing Cedars community member, and also 5G and EMF radiation effects, something that she is a big researcher on, has a great website about it called radiationdangers.com, I believe, where you can get a ton of great information and very thorough research about the effects of EMFs on human health. The last time I saw her, we were at our readers gathering in New York City, and she brought along, it's called an acoustimeter. It's a radiation meter that can convert the radiation in the air into sound so you can hear it. It can measure how much radiation is in the air, and then you can hear kind of the frequencies. And she's like, "Do you want to hear the radiation that's in this room?" I was like, yeah. And so she turns it on, and I'm like, oh my God, it's this crazy cackling sound. So yeah, I have an interview with her, and also I've set up an interview with my dear friend Anna from Russia. She is a bard. She also publishes some of you might have met her. She came to our last readers gathering in 2018. Jesus, it's been that long. I didn't do much traveling last year. We didn't do that. Yeah, it was 2018. And she also publishes a magazine called Kin's Domain Lifestyle, which is in Russian. She's been publishing that for a few years. It's a fantastic magazine where they go around interviewing different families and asking them questions about how they built their kin's domain, different solutions that they've created for water in their house, and how they have, their vehicles and everything like that. And it's very interesting. Great magazine. She's wonderful, insightful, intelligent person. So I'm looking forward to speaking with her. And I have a couple other interviews that need to be confirmed, but I plan on bringing you guys a lot of value. Plan on bringing you guys a lot more content in the near future. And also, like I said, compiling some research about the common obstacles and organizational problems that happen on Kin's domains, and sharing that as a resource through this podcast, and ideally through a written long form text document that you'll be able to get on the website anastasiausa.land. So I wanted to say, if you've listened this far, I really appreciate your time. I greatly appreciate your time and attention, and many blessings to you, many blessings to your dreams and your life. And thank you again for listening to this. And if you got any value from this, please share this with any of your friends who might be interested. The goal with this is to create community and media and a presence around the Ringing Cedars, because that's something that they've had in Russia for a long time, because Vladimir's involvement and the movement and everything beginning there was and has been a lot of deep community and media and content and all this stuff that's been being produced for a long time. We don't really have that here in the USA, and that's one of the goals of Anastasia USA. So please stay tuned. Please share this if you got value, and many blessings to you. Thank you.